I want you to try something for a second.
Right.
Wherever you are right now, whether you're commuting to work or maybe folding laundry or just, staring at a wall.
Yeah, just trying to get through the day.
Right. I want you to picture the phrase spiritual warrior. Like, what is the very first image that pops into your head?
Oh, I bet I know.
Right. For most of us, it's this highly cinematic, almost intimidating archetype. We picture someone with, unshakable confidence, loud bravado, endless energy, just someone who is absolutely, completely fearless.
Yeah, like this elite believer who wakes up at 4 a.m. every single day.
Yes.
They fast for 40 days without breaking a sweat. And, they're out there casting out demons before they've even had their morning coffee.
Exactly. It's the absolute pinnacle of human strength and discipline, essentially wrapped in armor.
Yeah.
And frankly, it is an exhausting image to measure yourself against.
Oh, totally exhausting. Because when we frame spiritual warfare that way, we end up viewing it as this exclusive arena.
Right.
Like it's reserved strictly for the spiritual elite. And if you aren't waking up with a literal battle cry, well, you just assume you don't belong on the battlefield at all.
And that is exactly what we are dismantling today, because what if that image, that entire mental picture we just built, is completely fundamentally wrong?
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
It is. What if the true posture of a warrior looks absolutely nothing like personal bravado? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the first chapter of Dev Raghu's book, Armed with Grace, Winning the Spiritual Battles You Never Saw Coming.
Such a great book.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the core insights from this material specifically for the weary.
Yeah.
So if you are a tired parent, waking up to a sick kid at 3 a.m., or an anxious believer who is just dreading opening your credit card bills, or just someone who feels utterly, completely unqualified to fight any kind of spiritual battle right now, this conversation is tailored directly for you.
It's so necessary, to have this conversation, because the core thesis we're exploring today is deeply counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities.
Right.
Spiritual warfare is not about confidence in yourself. It's just not. It's not about your volume or your fearlessness or having this flawless track record.
Yeah.
It is entirely about your confidence in God. The true posture of a spiritual warrior is humble dependence.
Okay, we need to really unpack that, because it pushes back against, well, pretty much everything we see in popular culture and even in some modern faith circles.
Oh, absolutely.
So if we are throwing out the hyper-confident, flawless image of a spiritual warrior, I think we need to look at the actual historical precedent. Let's look at the people historically recognized as God's heroes, because their resumes are, honestly, they're shocking.
They really are. When you look at the biblical precedent, the sheer consistency of their weakness is fascinating.
Yeah, give me an example.
Well, take Gideon. When God sends a messenger to call him a mighty warrior, Gideon isn't, leading an army. He isn't giving some brave cinematic speech.
Right.
He is quite literally hiding in a wine press out of absolute paralyzing terror.
Just trying not to be seen.
Exactly. He is so terrified, in fact, that he begs for multiple physical signs just to confirm he isn't making the whole interaction up. And God, with just infinite patience, meets him right in that anxiety and provides those signs.
That's wild. And then there's Moses. You picture the Charlton Heston version of Moses, right? Parting the Red Sea with this absolute booming authority.
Right, the movie version.
Yeah. But the actual story, he is standing at the burning bush, completely consumed by his own inadequacies. He brings up his speech impediment.
Yes.
He is essentially telling God to his face, "You have the wrong guy. Please send literally anyone else."
Send someone else, yeah. Or look at David. Before he was a king, before he was a giant slayer, he was a teenager, the youngest of 8 brothers.
And completely ignored.
Right. He was so thoroughly overlooked by his own family that his father completely forgot to even bring him into the room when the prophet came to anoint the next leader.
Wow.
And yet God looks at the forgotten, unimpressive kid out in the field and says, "That is my king."
I think the most striking example, though, is Elijah. Because Elijah actually does have that cinematic, elite warrior moment.
He does, Mount Carmel.
Right, he has this massive victory on Mount Carmel. He calls down fire from heaven. He's staring down hundreds of corrupt prophets. It's huge. But what happens the very next day?
He runs away.
He gets one threat from the queen, and he completely breaks down. He runs into the wilderness, he collapses under a broom tree, and he asks God to just let him die. He moves from absolute, unquestionable victory to suicidal exhaustion and fear in the blink of an eye.
And if you look at the New Testament, I mean, the pattern just continues.
Oh, yeah.
Peter famously denied he even knew Jesus when the pressure was actually on him. Thomas refused to believe until he saw physical proof.
Yeah.
Paul was literally a persecutor, actively trying to destroy the early church.
Yeah.
Mary Magdalene had an incredibly dark, tormented past. None of these people had flawless resumes. They were deeply flawed, they were often fearful, and sometimes they were entirely exhausted.
Let me bring in an analogy here, because the contrast between how the world operates and how this works is just wild.
Good.
Think about a worldly military recruitment strategy, like trying out for the Navy SEALs.
Right. The toughest of the tough.
Exactly. The entire system is engineered to weed out the weak. They recruit the strongest, the most fearless, the ones with the highest physical and mental endurance. And they aggressively filter out anyone who shows even a hint of frailty.
Right.
But God's recruitment strategy, it is the exact opposite. He actively recruits the people who know they are weak. It's this perfect reflection of the Apostle Paul's statement, when I am weak, then I am strong.
Yeah.
But I want to push into the why of that. Why does weakness feel like such a massive disqualifier to us?
Well, that connects directly to human psychology, honestly, and how we process distress. There are two massive distorting lenses that people often look through when they evaluate their own spiritual standing.
Okay, what are they?
Shame and physical exhaustion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So shame is incredibly toxic because it attacks your identity. It convinces you that your past mistakes or your current anxieties permanently revoke your spiritual authority. It essentially tells you you are fundamentally broken, therefore you cannot be used.
But exhaustion is a bit different, right? Because exhaustion isn't necessarily about a moral failure.
Right. But it feels like one. Psychologically, when you are dealing with cognitive depletion, like when you haven't slept, when you're juggling a stressful job, a struggling marriage, maybe financial pressure, your brain simply lacks the executive function to conjure up feelings of bravery.
Your nervous system is just fried.
Exactly. It's completely fried.
Yeah.
The problem is we interpret that biological exhaustion as a spiritual failure. We think, well, I don't feel brave today, therefore I must be failing as a Christian.
Wow.
But in God's value system, in his economy, weakness, whether it's from shame, anxiety, or pure physical burnout, is never a disqualification. It is an invitation to dependence.
That is so freeing. Because we look at Elijah sleeping under that tree, completely burnt out, and it's easy to think of him as some ancient, distant figure.
Yeah.
But that exact same brand of physical and emotional burnout is what happens to ordinary people today. People who aren't parting the Red Sea, but are just, trying to survive the week.
Absolutely.
And there's a really poignant modern example of this in our source material, a woman named Maria.
Yeah, Maria's story is deeply relatable for anyone who has been in the trenches of everyday life. She had all the foundational elements of faith.
Right.
She grew up in a Christian home. She was saved at a young age. She even led worship as a teenager.
Yeah.
But by her mid-30s, she was just worn down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't one spectacular crisis that took her out. It was this slow, grinding erosion of living in a difficult world.
Right. She was carrying grief, her marriage was struggling, there were severe drug issues in her extended family, and she had endured a very painful church split.
Which is devastating.
It is. It's that death by 1,000 paper cuts. And what's so crucial about her story is that she hadn't lost her belief in God. She still believed he existed, but she had lost her fight.
She articulated it so perfectly in the book. She said she felt that God was just a roof over her head, but not a sword in her hand.
Wow, what a phrase.
Isn't it? She knew he was providing basic shelter like salvation, ultimate security, but she had absolutely no idea how to engage with him in the actual day-to-day battle anymore. She was completely depleted.
But then comes the turning point, and it's not what you'd expect. She doesn't go to some massive, emotionally charged conference.
Yeah.
She doesn't hear a booming voice from the sky. It happens on an ordinary, exhausting morning, just reading a single verse, Exodus 14:14, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still."
And that verse completely shattered her paradigm.
Yeah.
She realized she was so exhausted because she was carrying a weight she was never designed to carry. She had been trying to fix her marriage, fix her family, manage her grief, all entirely in her own strength. Her breakthrough didn't come from trying harder or mustering up more bravery. It came through surrender.
Okay, wait. I have to stop you and push back on this.
Sure.
Because intuitively, surrender is the exact opposite of fighting. I mean, in any normal earthly context, if you surrender, you lose. You wave the white flag, you drop your weapons, and the enemy takes over.
Right.
If Maria just surrenders and her marriage is still struggling, her family still has drug issues, the bills are still due, doesn't holy surrender just become an excuse for passivity? Like, how can giving up control possibly be framed as a winning battle strategy?
It's a brilliant question. Because if we misunderstand surrender, we do just become passive victims of our circumstances.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the mechanics of who you are surrendering to. In the context of spiritual formation, which is just the slow, everyday process of how our character is shaped, surrender isn't giving up to the enemy.
No.
It is a formal transfer of command. You're transferring the weight of the battle to your commander.
Oh. So it's not ignoring the problem, it's changing who is responsible for the outcome.
Exactly. Maria's act of being still was a profoundly active, aggressive act of trust. Practically speaking, how did she surrender? It wasn't just singing a nice song.
Right.
It was sitting in her car before work, totally overwhelmed, and literally saying out loud, I do not have the energy to fix my husband today. I cannot control my extended family's addiction. I am laying this at your feet, and I'm choosing to trust that you are working even when I can't see it.
Oh, wow. So choosing to worship or pray when you feel absolutely nothing but despair, when your physical body is just exhausted, that is spiritual warfare.
Yes, because you are actively declaring God's ultimate authority over your circumstances, despite what your senses are telling you. You are stepping back so God can step in.
Yeah.
And as Maria did this, as she prayed raw, unfiltered prayers and started declaring scripture over her family instead of trying to manipulate the outcomes herself, things began to slowly, steadily heal. Not overnight, but the trajectory changed because she stopped fighting in her own strength.
That makes so much sense. The surrender is what activates the strength. But once we understand how to fight through this posture of surrender and dependence, we have to be incredibly careful to properly identify what we are fighting.
Oh, definitely.
Because if you misdiagnose the battlefield, you are going to reach for the wrong weapons.
Which leads to a lot of frustration. And more burnout.
Yes, and this is where we have to talk about the difference between living in a fallen world versus living in a contested world.
This is a huge distinction.
Because let's be honest, we've all met that well-meaning person who blames literally every minor inconvenience on a demonic attack, right?
Oh, yeah.
The car gets a flat tire on the highway, demonic attack, you burn your toast in the morning. Spiritual warfare, you get a cold. The enemy is trying to silence you.
Right, which is not only exhausting, it's just bad theology. It gives the enemy way too much credit.
Yeah.
This material brings a vital grounding balance to that perspective. It defines the fallen world as the natural reality of a broken creation. Because of human selfishness, greed, and the physical decay of the world, bodies get sick, cars break down, the economy fluctuates.
Right, relationships experience severe friction simply because two humans are flawed and selfish.
Exactly. Sometimes a flat tire is just a nail in the road. Not every difficulty requires a supernatural explanation.
I want to use an analogy here to really cement the difference, like treating a physical wound. Let's say you are hiking through the woods and you scrape your arm deeply on a jagged branch.
Okay.
That initial cut, that is the fallen world. It happens. It's a natural consequence of moving through a rugged environment. But if you ignore it and you don't clean it, an infection sets in. That infection, the toxic spread that threatens your whole body, represents the contested world.
That is a perfect framework.
Because if you mix up your weapons, you're in trouble. If you try to use a spiritual weapon on a purely natural problem, like trying to cast out a demon of bleeding while you're standing there with a fresh cut, you're gonna look crazy and you're still gonna bleed. You need a practical bandage.
Yeah, you really do.
But at the same time, if you use a natural weapon on a spiritual problem, if you just put a piece of gauze over a deep systemic infection, you'll end up completely defeated. You need actual medicine to fight the infection.
Precisely. And applying that to the contested world, it means we recognize we have an active, intelligent enemy who exploits the natural fallenness of the world. He rarely has to create the initial wound. He just looks for the cuts you already have and fans the flames.
So what does that look like in everyday life?
Well, let's say you are exhausted and you have a totally natural fallen world disagreement with your spouse about a credit card bill. It's stressful, but normal.
Right.
The contested world is when the enemy waits for that crack to form and then whispers lies into it. Suddenly, a fight about a $50 charge spirals into, they never respect you. This marriage is a mistake. You're going to end up alone and bankrupt.
Wow.
He takes a natural wound and introduces a systemic infection of fear, deception, and hopelessness.
That is terrifyingly relatable. So if we know we are navigating both the fallen cut and the contested infection, what does a mature response look like?
It requires mature discernment, which means using both practical wisdom and spiritual weapons simultaneously. Practical wisdom means acknowledging that you live in a physical body.
Yeah.
It means recognizing that sometimes the absolute most spiritual thing you could do for your anxiety is to drink a glass of water and get a solid 8 hours of sleep.
Which feels almost too simple. But if your brain is sleep deprived, it cannot properly regulate emotion.
Exactly. Practical wisdom also means utilizing counseling. It means going to the doctor and taking prescribed medicine for clinical depression or physical illness. Seeking professional, emotional, or mental health help is deeply practical, and it is completely complementary to spiritual warfare.
So good.
Practical wisdom is never, ever less spiritual than praying.
I love that. You treat the cut with a bandage.
But you don't stop there. You do not neglect the spiritual weapons to fight the infection. You pray. You read scripture. You actively choose worship. You speak with the authority of Christ over the lies being whispered into your mind. You use both the brain and the spirit that God gave you.
It's refusing to ignore either reality. You go to therapy to understand your psychological triggers, like why that argument about the credit card bill escalated so quickly, and at the exact same time, you pray against the spirit of division and fear that is trying to weaponize those triggers to destroy your marriage.
Exactly. When you understand this balance, a massive shift happens. You stop fighting flesh and blood. You realize your spouse isn't the true enemy. Your boss isn't the true enemy. The frustrating person online isn't the enemy.
Right.
You start aiming your spiritual weapons at the actual spiritual forces of darkness while extending profound grace to the human beings caught in the crossfire.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, we started this deep dive talking about the weary, the tired, the anxious, the parent who feels like they're failing.
Yeah.
The believer who feels completely unqualified to be a Christian soldier because they just don't feel brave today.
And if we look at the overarching message here, it is fundamentally a message of profound relief. God does not require your personal bravado.
Thank goodness.
Right. He isn't sitting in heaven waiting for you to muster up an elite, flawless performance. He only requires your honest dependence. He requires you to show up exactly as weary as you are and say, I cannot do this without you.
That is the ultimate warrior posture. It's not chest thumping. It is humble dependence on God's strength, His grace, and His faithfulness.
Yes.
It's hiding in the wine press like Gideon, absolutely terrified and still letting God use you to save a nation. It's feeling as totally exhausted as Elijah, collapsing under a tree, taking a nap, eating a meal, and then letting God speak to you in a gentle whisper.
It is recognizing that your weakness is the exact entry point for God's power. Shame wants to tell you that your anxiety disqualifies you, but the invitation here is warm and incredibly encouraging. Bring that weakness to God today. You do not have to clean yourself up, put on a brave face, or fix your own life before you can step onto the battlefield.
If this conversation has resonated with you, if you are driving in your car right now realizing that you've been carrying the weight of a battle you were never meant to carry alone, we highly recommend picking up Armed with Grace by Dev Raku.
Such an important read.
It is. We've only just scratched the surface of the first chapter today. The book offers a much fuller teaching on these concepts, more incredible stories of ordinary people finding victory, and a highly practical, scripture-based battle plan for your daily life.
It is a phenomenal resource for moving out of a defensive, constantly reacting posture and stepping into a grounded, peaceful, and dependent strength.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. Think back to that image we started with, the loud, fearless, completely self-sufficient warrior. We've dismantled that. We know now that God actively chooses the weak, the weary, and the overlooked.
Right.
So consider this. What if the very area of your life where you feel the most weak, the most exhausted, and the most unqualified right now? What if that isn't the place where God is disappointed in you? What if that is exactly the territory God is preparing to win back through your surrender?
What an incredible perspective shift. If you truly believe that, it changes the entire nature of the fight.
It really does. Keep that question with you this week as you go about your life. And remember, you don't have to be strong to be a warrior. You just have to deeply know and trust the commander. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.